It was a little before 9 o'clock. The sun was setting into a bank of smoky violet cloud, and I had lost my way. I reversed the car in a gateway and drove back half a mile to the finger post. I had spent the past 24 hours with a client near the coast and was returning to London. But it had clearly been foolish to leave the main route and head across country. The road had cut through the downs, pale mounds on either side, and then run into a straight tree line stretched to the crossroads. The finger post markings were faded and there were no recent signs, so that when the right turning came I almost shot past it, for there was no sign at all here, just a lane and high banks in which the roots of trees were set deep as ancient teeth. But I thought that this would eventually lead me back to the A road. The lane narrowed. The sun was behind me, flaring into the rearview mirror. Then came a sharp bend. The lane turned into a single track and the view ahead was dark beneath overhanging branches. I slowed. This could not possibly be a way. Was there a house? Could I find someone to put me on the right road? I got out. Opposite me was an old sign, almost greened over. The White House. Below, someone had tacked up a piece of board. It hung loose, but I could just make out the words "garden closed" in roughly painted lettering. Well, a house was a house. There would be people. I drove slowly on down the track. The banks were even steeper, the tree trunks vast and elephantine. Then, at the end of the lane, I came out of the trees and into a wide clearing and saw that it was still light after all, the sky a pale enameled silver blue. There was no through road. Ahead were a wooden gate and a high hedge wound about with briars and brambles. All I could hear were birds settling down, a thrush singing high up on the branches of a walnut tree, and blackbirds pinking as they scurried in the undergrowth. I got out of the car and, as I stood there, the birdsong gradually subsided, and then there was an extraordinary hush, a strange quietness into which I felt I had broken as some unwelcome intruder. I ought to have turned back then. I ought to have retraced my way to the finger post and tried again to find the main road. But I did not. I was drawn on through the gate between the overgrown bushes. I walked cautiously and for some reason tried not to make a noise as I pushed aside low branches and strands of bramble. The gate was stuck halfway, dropped on its hinges so that I could not push it open further, and had to ease myself through the gap. More undergrowth, rhododendron bushes, briar hedge growing through beech. The path was mossed over and grassy, but I felt stones here and there beneath my feet. After 100 yards or so I came to a dilapidated hut which looked like the remains of an old ticket booth. The shutter was down. The roof had rotted. A rabbit, its scut bright white in the dimness of the bushes, scrabbled out of sight. I went on. The path broadened out and swung to the right. And there was the house. It was a solid Edwardian house, long and with a wide veranda. A flight of shallow steps led up to the front door. I was standing on what must once have been a large and well-kept forecourt. There were still some patches of gravel between the weeds and grass. To the right of the house was an archway half obscured by rose briars, in which was set a wrought iron gate. I glanced round. The car ticked slightly as the engine cooled. I should have gone back then. I needed to be in London, and I had already lost my way. Clearly the house was deserted and possibly derelict. I would not find anyone here to give me directions. I went up to the gate in the arch and peered through. I could see nothing but a jungle of more shrubs and bushes, overarching trees, and the line of another path disappearing away into the darkening greenery. I touched the cold iron latch. It lifted. I pushed. The gate was stuck fast. I put my shoulder to it and it gave a little, and rust flaked away at the hinges. I pushed harder, and slowly the gate moved to scraping on the ground, opening. I stepped through it and I was inside. Inside a large, overgrown, empty, abandoned garden. To one side, steps led to a terrace. And the house. It was a place which had been left to the air and the weather, the wind, the sun, the rabbits and the birds. Left to fall gently, sadly into decay, for stones to crack. And paths to be obscured and then to disappear, for window panes to let in the rain and birds to nest in the roof. Gradually, it would sink in on itself and then into the earth. How old was this house? 100 years? In another 100 there would be nothing left of it. I turned. I could barely see ahead now. Whatever. The garden, now closed, had been, nature had taken it back, covered it with blankets of ivy and trail. Strands of creeper, thickened it over with weed. Sucked the light and the air out of it so that only the toughest plants could grow and in growing invade and occupy. I should go back. But I wanted to know more. I wanted to see more. I wanted for some reason I did not understand to come here in the full light of day to see everything. Uncover what was concealed, reveal what had been hidden. Find out why. I might not have returned. Most probably by the time I had made my way back to the main road as of course I would, and reached London and my calm fortable flat, the White House and what I had found there in the dusk of that late evening would have receded to the back of my mind and before long been quite forgotten. Even if I had come this way I might well never have found it again. And then, as I stood in the gathering stillness and soft spring dusk, something happened. I do not much care whether or not I am believed. That does not matter. I know. That is all. I know as surely as I know that yesterday morning it rained onto the windowsill of my bedroom after I had left a window slightly open. I know as well as I know that I had a root canal filling in a tooth last Thursday and felt great pain from it when I woke in the night. I know that it happened as well as I know that I had black coffee at breakfast. I know because if I close my eyes now I feel it happening again. The memory of it is vivid and it is a physical memory. My body feels it. This is not only something in my mind. I stood in the dim, green-lit clearing and above my head a silver pairing of moon cradled the evening star. The birds had fallen silent. There was not the slightest stirring of the air. And as I stood I felt a small hand creep into my right one as if a child had come up beside me in the dimness and taken hold of it. It felt cool in its fingers curled themselves trustingly into my palm and rested there, and the small thumb and forefinger tucked my own thumb between them. As a reflex I bent it over and we stood for a time which was out of time, my own man's hand and the very small hand held as closely together as the hand of a father and his child. But I am not a father and the small child was invisible.